Number 30 on the list is Chris Letang. Played
Ooh,
for the Penguins between
controversial.
2006. Yeah, this one will definitely be a controversial one. Played for the Penguins between 2006 and the present. Six-time All-Star, three-time Stanley Cup champion. Steve, is he the greatest defenseman in Penguins history?
I don't know. He's definitely played the long. I guess if you go longevity, I think Larry Murphy's better. I like Brooks Orpik better. He's a good player and he's good at what he does, but he just turns it over so much. It just stop, please. Plus, he has had some health problems he's overcome, so it's a good story too. But he's not a bad player. I mean, you probably can't go wrong with him or Gonchar or Murphy on your point. I mean, like I said, all time Penguins power play. I think we know who's on the low part of that. The two people down there,
Yeah.
the point people, you could probably debate till the cows come home. And
Yeah, for
where
me,
did Ron Francis play on the power play? I don't remember. I'm sure he's going to be coming up
yeah, I
on
think on the one of the half boards.
balls. Yeah,
I think it's probably, if you're going to have that argument, it's got to be between Letang and Larry Murphy. I think those are the two. I mean, you
yeah.
can put Gonchar up there. You can put Zubov or Brooks Orpik or even oh gosh, even Randy Carlyle, who won a Norris Trophy with the
Yeah.
Penguins way back when. But I think I won't argue with anybody that says Letang is the greatest. And obviously we have him higher on the list than Larry Murphy, so I guess we're saying that too. All right, number 29 is Darrell Revis. Was a cornerback for the Pitt Panthers football team between 2004 and 2006. Has 8 career interceptions at Pitt, but even 8 interceptions is pretty impressive given that no one ever threw on his side. Just another guy that you just can't measure with stats, right? And Steve and I had season tickets back then. We watched him play a ton, and it just literally a whole half of the field was just missing for whoever the opposing offense was. You just couldn't throw to that side of the field. It was ridiculous. He was very dominant. It reminds me of a Steeler player we're going to have on this list a little higher that was also a cornerback, where he just when he was on the field, he was just dominant. He was also a pretty good kick returner. Has a famous highlight reel punt return against West Virginia at Heinz Field. But really, the Revis Island thing that became in vogue when he played for the New York Jets, that was for sure a thing at Pitt. They just didn't call it that at the time.
So it's very hard to start anywhere in college football as a freshman, never mind, at a major school. And I don't know. There's only been a few guys have done it, and there's only been a few guys have done it really well. And Darrell Revis is in that category with those other people I mentioned.
For sure. That's why we have him 29.
Yep.
28 is another guy that he was okay at Pitt, I guess.
Yeah, it's so weird because he just came out of nowhere his senior year. He really had a kind of a very middling career for his first 3 years. So
Yeah, it's the guy we're talking about is Aaron Donald. Played for Pitt from 2010 to 2013. Was
I
the
mean,
ACC Defensive Player of the Year. Go ahead, Steve.
yeah, the highlight of his Pitt career is winning the Pizza Bowl. I mean,
So Aaron Donald
yeah,
had the misfortune of playing for Pitt probably during the worst 4 year stretch
yeah.
of the last, at least of this century.
And maybe the best
And
thing that happened was Pat Narduzzi because Pat Narduzzi, they seem to like really turn the corner with defensive linemen. This is like when things started to like they just started to churn out defensive linemen like nobody's business.
so what had happened to Pitt
Yeah.
was that Aaron Donald was recruited by Dave Wanstead, and then at the end of his freshman year, Dave Wanstead was fired. They hired, they had an interim coach, coached the bowl game. Then they hired this guy. I don't even remember his name, but he got
Haywood,
arrested.
Michael Haywood,
Michael Haywood got arrested for beating his wife, I think,
his girlfriend, something like that.
girlfriend.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he got fired after 2 weeks after he got hired. Then they hired this guy that named Todd Graham that he didn't have a soul, and then he quits before that his season's over, and they have another interim coach. And then they hire Paul Christ. He's there for a couple of years, and he goes to Wisconsin. So it was just a time of utter and complete turmoil. They had like 48 coaches during Aaron Donald's 4 years at Pitt, and yet he was still he was still a great player. And another guy where stats won't do him justice. Just go on YouTube and look up Aaron Donald Pitt highlights. Find the
It's the
game against
Duke.
Duke.
Duke, yeah, where he tackles the quarter. It's Daniel Jones too. Tackle the quarterback and the running back on like a running play. It's like,
Yeah.
I'll just tackle both of you.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is play action or not, so I'll just tackle them both.
Yeah.
I mean, he was so good. And I remember, again, when he came into the NFL, I've said this before, I'm like, gosh, he was so good, but maybe, sometimes guys look so good in college and against NFL offensive linemen, he's not going to be as dominant as he was at Pitt. And sure enough, he's one of the greatest NFL defensive players of all time. Like literally, he's won 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards.
Outside of Reggie White, I've never seen a defensive player
Yeah.
single-handedly win a Super Bowl for a team, and he did that for the Rams. Like he literally sacked Joe Burrow on the play on that, at the end of that game.
Yeah. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say he will go down like at that Reggie White, Lawrence Taylor tier of defensive players. Joe Green, like I don't think that's an exaggeration. And he was really, really good at Pitt too, which is why we have him at number 28. Number 27 is the Flower.
Yeah.
This one will not be controversial. Marc-Andre Fleury, unless people think we put him too low, played for the Penguins between 2003 and 2017. He's the Penguins' all-time leader in pretty much every major goaltender category: wins, shutouts, goals against, saves. Obviously made the save that I think, Steve, you were alluding to earlier against Nicholas Lidstrom that clinches the 2009 Stanley Cup. Just a legend and an all-time favorite in Pittsburgh. I think this guy could come here and run for mayor and he would win by a landslide.
Yeah, it's like I bet you compare, like he never won a Vezina. I don't think he was even in the conversation. But it's just like he played for a Penguins team that didn't play the greatest of defense and got hung out to dry a lot. And he gave up some goals. But you know what? He made the saves when he needed to make. He made so many times in the third period. It's like he's the opposite of the guy they have now, Jarry, where he seems to fall apart in the third period. Like Fleury just seems to rise to the occasion, and you just need that 1 or 2 saves late under 2 minutes to go in the third period, and he would just come up with it, and you would walk out of the building with a win.
All right, number 26 is Ernie Stautner.
It's tough to rank this guy.
It really is.
Because he played in a different era and on a crappy team.
Yes. So Ernie Stautner was a defensive end for the Steelers between 1950 and 1963. Pro Football Hall of Fame, 9-time Pro Bowler, arguably the best defensive player of his era. But like Steve said, terrible teams where the defense was probably out on the field a lot, right? Steelers didn't have a lot of good offense back then, so I'm guessing the defense was probably out on the field a lot, and he's still one of the best players of the era. And there's only 3 Steelers in the history of the team that have had their number retired by the franchise. Ernie Stautner is one of them. I think we have to put him high on this list just because, again, the Steelers, the Rooneys, obviously have owned the team the entire history, and they have intentionally framed this guy as one of their all-time greatest players, one of the few guys that they've retired their number. So I think that he has to be high on this list because of that. Number 25 on the list is Mike Webster, Steelers center between 1974 and 1988, Hall of Famer, member of both the this is pretty impressive, Steve, the 1970s NFL All-Decade Team and the 1980s NFL All-Decade Team. So
that's a trick.
Says a lot. That says a lot about his, like, how dominant he was for a long period of time. Also made the NFL's 100th anniversary team. There was only 4 centers on that team. So in 100 years of NFL football, the NFL determined that he's one of the 4 best centers to ever play the game of football. Pretty high honor, huge on those Super Bowl teams, consistent, led that running game. I don't know what else you can say about Mike Webster. Obviously had some issues later in life, whether that was CTE related or not, but during his playing career, he was great.
And they said he was pretty humble too, like a humble guy, very hardworking. He was not a big one of these big mammoth offensive linemen. He was a smaller guy that would pull and kind of, cut and stuff, trap plays and stuff. So yeah, it definitely different type. And hey, they wouldn't have 4 Super Bowls definitely without Mike Webster.
Number 24 on the list, Jerome Bettis, played for the Steelers between 1996 and 2005. He's a Pro Football Hall of Famer. He's still in the top 10 all time in the NFL rushing yards, even though he's been retired for almost 20 years now, which is hard to believe.
Oh
Makes me
man,
feel
I
really old.
he still looks good. Like his kid is getting recruited by Notre Dame. That's how I didn't realize Jerome Bettis is that old. His
Yeah.
son is got to go to. Well, of course
Like,
he's gonna. Well, he's getting recruited by Notre Dame. Of course he's gonna go to Notre Dame. Yeah,
well,
Jerome ain't gonna. His daughter already goes there. Jerome ain't gonna let him go anywhere else.
it's literally almost 2 decades ago now that
Yeah.
he won Super Bowl 40 in his final game and retired. So it's been a while. It doesn't feel like that long ago. But
I think he lives in Atlanta, but he comes into Pittsburgh during the football season to record. Like he does that Jerome Bettis show. So.
yeah, he's like Flurry. He's another guy that just people will love in this town
Oh
till the end of
yeah,
time.
I mean, yeah. If him and Flurry ran for any political position, they like one could be county executive, the other could be mayor, and
Yeah.
nobody would be
Yes.
upset. Yeah.
Yep, that's absolutely accurate.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't
I'm
know what
all
else you can
aboard the
say.
Flurry Bettis ticket.
Number 23 is another Steeler. It's Jack Lambert, Steeler from 1974 to 1984, Hall of Famer, 9-time Pro Bowler, 1976 Defensive Player of the Year, also elected to that 100th anniversary all-time NFL team, which was again pretty select. Tough as nails guy, just man, another guy Pittsburgh fans just fell in love with.
Yeah,
because he just didn't suffer fools at all. He always played tough. The moment in the Super Bowl with was that Cliff Harris, Steve?
Yeah, or was it? Yeah, it was Cliff Harris or Cliff.
Yeah, Cliff
Yeah,
Harris.
Cliff
He throws him down to the ground.
He throws the kicker. Yeah, Roy Girella. No, Roy Girella misses a field goal, and he's like, "Oh, good kick," like real sarcastically, and Jack Lambert's like, "Nope." And the Steelers like said that got them going because like they're like, "Hey, we're not gonna. That's America's team, and we're supposed to." Like they weren't intimidated after that. So.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, he has the stats: 9 Pro Bowls, Defensive Player of the Year. But another guy where you can really argue the intangibles probably were more important than. Kind of like Joey Porter, right?
What an idiot Cliff Harris is too. Like,
yeah,
because I think they were winning too at that
they were.
point. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, yeah, that's really very similar to like Daniel Carcillo for the Flyers when he picked a fight with Talbot. It's like you had all the momentum, you had no reason to do that. Just control yourself.
Yeah,
and Cliff Harris couldn't, and Dallas lost. So sucks to be them. Number 22 is Evgeny Malkin.
So I don't. I guess I don't know what to do with him either. Like he's such an. I don't know.
Well, we averaged him out at number 22.
22, yeah.
He played for the Penguins between 2006 and, as of the time of this recording, present day. He's a 3-time Stanley Cup champion. He's won the Art Ross Trophy twice. That's leading league in scoring. He won the Calder Trophy for Rookie of the Year in 2007. He won the Conn Smythe Trophy for Playoff MVP in 2009, and the Hart Trophy is League MVP in 2012. So he's got quite the resume. I think
he's just it's like, is he good because he plays with the other people that I'm sure will be higher on his list, or is he just? I mean, I don't know. They always seem to go deeper into playoffs when he's on his game than just the other people. When he's on his game, he can be absolutely unstoppable.
I think, his career is obviously not over, but to me, the highlight is always going to be that 2009 playoff run because he was just so good. That goal he scored against Carolina, over his shoulder. The conference finals, Carolina came into that conference finals really on a tear. And the Penguins swept them in 4 games because
it wasn't even close. Yeah, they had no answer for Malkin.
Yeah, they had no answer for Malkin. That was literally, it wasn't even a series because Malkin just single-handedly destroyed them. And then he was very good against Detroit as well. So
good defensive center too. People forget that. Like he's a very good defensive center.
Number 21 is another all-time great Penguin. It's Ron Francis. Played for the Penguins between 1991 and 1998. He's a Hockey Hall of Famer. He is top 5 all-time in the NHL in points. Obviously, not all of those were with the Penguins, but it's worth mentioning that, like, literally, if you look at the top 5 all-time scoring leaders in NHL history, Ron Francis is one of them. Uh, th-
Doesn't Malkin play point on the power play too? From time from time
Sometimes.
Yeah, I so okay, you figure out the ultimate Penguins power play.
Yeah.
You tell me who you're leaving on the bench.
Yeah, that would be hard.
They could put out a second team power play that would be probably just as an all time there too.
That's a good point. It's a really good point. Ron Francis, though, I mean, they got him in that famous trade with Hartford, which to this day still baffles the imagination that they were able to get him. Ronnie franchise, all time great. Uh, that really gave. I mean, the Penguins had Mario Lemieux for 6 or 7 seasons by that point, and hadn't won anything because that was they had one line, and then when
Yeah.
they got Francis, now they had a second line that was deadly.
And then they had Trottier on the third,
Yeah.
and so they had three competent lines. Yeah.
Yeah. So Ron Francis, again, another guy whose place I think in Penguins history is very secure as an all-time great. Number 20 is Debo. It's James Harrison. 3 different stints with the Steelers: 2002, 2004 to 12, and then 2014 to 2017. Was the team's all-time sack leader until very recently. Was the 2008 Defensive Player of the Year. And that year, they won Defensive Player of the Year. Made a semi-important play in that Super Bowl.
A pass that Kurt Warner wish he wouldn't have ever thrown.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, kind of similar to what we said about TJ Watt, just a guy that's just so dominant in his prime. And then even when he came back, he had retired. Remember, he actually retired and then came back and had some games where he, like, especially against the Ravens. I don't know what it was about the Ravens. I think because they had cut him early in his career. But even when he was older, he had some great games. Definitely a little bit of a surly kind of personality at times. But man, just that Super Bowl interception alone, right? That should be a statue somewhere of him just running back 100 yards against the Cardinals offense with Larry Fitzgerald chasing him from behind.
Yeah. It's one of the greatest plays in Super Bowl history too. So it's
Number 19 is Dan Marino. Was the Pitt quarterback between 1979 and 1982. Set numerous passing records at Pitt. Joe Paterno, who coached against a lot of people over his career, said, quote, Dan Marino is the best quarterback I've ever coached against at the collegiate level. So that's pretty high praise coming from Joe Paterno. Dan Marino, I think, we talked about this in a previous episode, greatest player at the most important position in Pitt history. So to me, that's why he's got to be this high, Steve.
Yeah. There might be one other person in Pitt history that outranks him a little bit just because they have some hardware that
fair
Dan doesn't have. But and he had a bad senior year, so that kind of holds him back a little bit. But you can't go wrong with Dan Marino at quarterback.
Number 18 is a guy named Barry Lamar Bonds.
I think this is a fair ranking.
Played for the Pirates between 1986 and 1992. Won 2 National League MVPs during that time. I don't think you can say that there was a better 5-tool player in the history of the Pirates than Barry Bonds. And if he plays a little longer, if he plays maybe just one more contract with the Pirates, he's probably in the top 5 in this list. Like he's so good. He's so good. I know we all hate him, and he took steroids and all that stuff. So I'm not going to pretend like that never happened. But he's so good, Steve.
But Tim, steroids wasn't cheating. I mean, there was no rule banning steroids. So I mean, it's like throwing the spitball or Albert Pujols. You realize Albert Pujols used an illegal bat for half his career? Nobody talks about that. The only because the Major League Baseball said, "Oh, we'll grandfather you in." So, and Albert Pujols has 600 home runs. Is he going to get held out of the Hall of Fame because he used an illegal bat for half his career? I mean, whatever. So I don't know. That's the argument I always make when people say, "Well, Barry shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame because of steroids." It wasn't against the rules when he did it. And number 2, there's a bunch of other people that have broken rules that have since been made illegal that are going to be in the Hall of Fame, are in the Hall of Fame. But I mean, it's just and what holds him back is kind of like, once again, we go back to Terrell Owens we had talked about
Yeah.
earlier,
Yes.
and it's just Terrell Owens is just. I mean, when you're like, I think it's sometimes like people give you the benefit of the doubt when, oh, he's a nice guy, let's bring him in, or they think of you fondly. But when you're kind of have a chip on your shoulder and a lot of attitude, like Barry Bonds did, then people hold that against you, and that's what's kind of going on with Barry Bonds.
Number 17 is a great all-time player for the Steelers. Mel Blount played for the Steelers between 1970 and 1983. Hall of Famer, 1975 Defensive Player of the Year. Also on the 100th anniversary NFL team. 57 career interceptions. And I think, again, stats, accolades, awards, anniversary teams. To me, that Mel Blount's greatness is defined by the fact that they literally had to change the rules of NFL football because Mel Blount was too dominant.
That was Don Shula. Just wah.
It was, but that was
Yeah.
why, because
Yeah.
the teams weren't scoring points. The NFL knows that, the NFL smartly is something that the NHL for 40 years has yet to figure out, that, people want to see scoring and high flying action. They don't want to see, 9-6 football games. So Mel Blount was too good. He would chuck people at the line of scrimmage. They said, you can't do that anymore. Well, beyond the 5 yards, he would, so they literally changed the rules because of Mel Blount. That's why, again, throw away the stats for a minute. To me, that's why he's an all-time legend.
He still looks like he could play, man. Have you seen him? He wears that
No, I
cowboy
haven't.
hat. He's like in great shape. I mean, he wears that cowboy hat. No, I would call him Mr. Blunt if I saw him in person. It's sir and yes, sir, with that dude.
Yeah, he was a force of nature for
Yeah.
sure. Number 16 on the list is Josh Gibson, played for the Homestead Grays and Pittsburgh Crawfords between 1930 and 1946. 12-time All-Star, 2-time Triple Crown winner, hit over 800 home runs. That's unofficial because
We
the
don't know.
Negro
Yeah.
Leagues did not keep complete stats. But that's a lot of historians and stuff have done some studies, and they think he literally hit over 800 home runs. And Steve, kind of, you said this earlier. You made this remark earlier, but like literally, that's what they called him back in the day. They called Babe Ruth the White Josh Gibson.
There's stories about him hitting home runs halfway across Oakland when they were in Forbes Field. So he was a catcher by trade. Didn't get a lot of credit until recently, but one of the greatest ball players of all time. No matter what league you put him in, the Major League Baseball, he gives Babe Ruth a run for his money. He's up. He's at least in the conversation, I would guess.
Yeah, and another guy who just came along a little too early, and when the color barrier got broken, he was not included in that mix. He was at the end of his career at that point, unfortunately. Number 15 is Jack Ham, played for the Steelers between 1971 and 1982. 8-time Pro Bowler, 100th anniversary team guy as well. Tony Dungy, who of course is a all-time great coach, but was also a player on that Steelers 70s defense, says, quote, "I've never seen anyone play the outside linebacker position better than Jack Ham." And just like Joe Paterno, Tony Dungy has decades and decades of experience in pro football. So pretty high accolade coming from that guy.
Kind of like the exact opposite of Jack Lambert. He's like, Jack Lambert was a tough guy, frothing at the mouth, running around. Jack Ham was always more of the thinking man's linebacker. And so, I mean, he is from Penn State. He did Penn State. He did color for Penn State for the longest time, which was just always great to listen to if Pitt was beating them, because then you could listen to him and the other guy cry about it.
Yeah,
that's which in their defense didn't happen too often. So
that's true. Yeah, it was pretty rare.
Yeah,
I like your comparison there between him and Lambert. I think it's almost the same comparison we were making between Swan and Stallworth. Like Lambert was the Swan. He was like the flashy, attention.
He just stuck out. He had no teeth. He's like
right.
flying around, hitting people, playing reckless abandon, where Ham was more, he still played tough, but he would more played the position, maybe
more of a tactician.
Yeah.
Yep.
The thinking man's linebacker.
I like it.
There you go.
Number 14 is a teammate of Jack
Oh,
Ham's.
jeez, yeah.
It's the late Franco Harris. Played for the Steelers between 1972 and 1984. Is
Another
a
guy that could have ran for mayor and probably won
oh yeah,
easily. Easily,
yes.
good person. I did not realize. I remember that. I remember. I don't remember in the '90s. I think I don't know if I spoke about this on another podcast where the KKK wanted to come to Pittsburgh, and I remember this in the late '90s, and the court ruled they had to let them because of freedom of speech, even though whatever, they're a bunch of idiots. And so Franco went down and had a sit-in at the city council because he was felt that, and that's the type of person Franco was. And they literally had to send Dan Rooney down to like talk him out. He was going to sit there individual and try and like waylay, that group from coming in, which they eventually were allowed to. But then he eventually, I think what they ended up doing was they talked Franco and some other members of the community to have like a counter protest over
Okay.
at Point State Park. But yeah, I didn't remember that until his death. And that what an interesting person. Besides, obviously, catching the most famous play outside of Bill Mazeroski in Pittsburgh sports history. But they literally they had to bring down the guy who was the head of media relations from the Steelers because he wouldn't leave. He brought a book with him and was literally, you ever been down to like the city Grant Street, like where that little like overhang is and the
Yeah.
pillars are where they put the Christmas tree?
Yes.
He was sitting like right there and he wasn't
Oh
going to
wow.
move.
Wow.
Yeah. And he brought like a book and a blanket and some food, I guess. It was like, good for him. Good for him. Good dude.
Wow.
And yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, Steve, so that's cool. I didn't know that story. And like you said, obviously
And they had to
people
bring Dan Rooney, like he wouldn't leave. Like they had to bring Dan Rooney, who
wow,
obviously the players love and respect,
right.
to kind of talk him out of it. Like, hey, we'll have a counter protest somewhere else. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
we
And
we miss leaders. The Dan Rooneys of the world are long gone, and I know I miss their leadership and Franco's too. I mean,
yeah.
we need more Dan Rooneys and Franco Harris's in our leadership right now, and less idiots like we have now.
Yep. Totally
Yeah.
agree. And
Yeah.
and Franco, of course, always will be remembered for the immaculate reception, but also as a Steelers all-time leading rusher, also as a Super Bowl IX MVP and a Hall of Famer. So Franco Harris, again, another guy whose place in Pittsburgh sports lore is, I think, will be secure long after the generation that got to see him
Yeah.
play is
I
gone.
wish, I know he's gotten a lot of ballyhoo and he gets a lot of credit for a lot of stuff, and he takes a little bit of heat for supporting Joe Paterno through all that scandal. But I don't know. I'm willing to when nobody's perfect, and I'm willing to forgive him, even though he is a Penn State guy. But no,
Yeah.
he really is a hard guy to not like, and just respectable on and off the field, and good dude, good dude. It's hard to find a bad story about him.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of good
Oh,
dudes,
another good. Yeah. Yeah.
number 13 is Larry Fitzgerald. Played from Pitt 2002 to
Two
2003.
seasons. Can you believe it? He only played for
I know.
2 seasons.
It's hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it was the Walter Camp Player of the Year, the first sophomore to win that award, won the Bolitnikoff Award, should have won the Heisman. We won't go into that tragedy again. But just one of the most unstoppable athletes in Pittsburgh sports history, Steve. Like it was a guy that you knew he was getting the ball, you knew they had nowhere else to go, and people just couldn't stop him.
He was Rod Rutherford's best target. Like they would be inside the 5. You could literally like it's a fade, and nobody could stop it. Nobody could stop it. He would just throw it up and let Larry go get it, and he's gonna go get it, and you're just gonna be out of luck. Yeah.
Yep, nearly single-handedly cost the Steelers a Super Bowl in his NFL
Yeah.
career. Did everything possible to win that game.
Yeah.
I just an all-time great. I don't know what else you can say about Larry Legend. Again, I think one of these days I really want to do just an episode about him, Steve.
Oh, that'll be fun. Yeah, that'll be a fun one. Yeah, him running down almost running down James Harrison.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a good person off the field.
Yes.
They came back. I think they retired his number. I do believe just this season I think they finally did. Yeah. So yeah.
He he was kind of the antithesis too of Like we mentioned Terrell Owens and guys like that.
Yeah, he's
You
the
know,
exact opposite. And he never left the Cardinals, never played for another team
right?
besides suffered out there in the desert for years and years and
Yes,
years until they finally got Kurt Warner and a decent coach.
for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
literally. And
how
then
many other wide receivers would have put up with that? I mean,
right, right. And then how many diva wide receivers are
yeah,
there that dance and
yeah,
celebrate? He would always hand the ball to the official.
yeah.
Just yeah, I yeah, I'm glad Larry Fitzgerald made it this high because he's well deserving, even though his time in Pittsburgh was short. A guy whose time in Pittsburgh was not short was Willie Stargell, played for the Pirates for 21 seasons, 1962 to 1982, seven-time All-Star, National League MVP, all-time leader in home runs, Hall of Famer. They have a statue outside PNC Park of Willie Stargell, and of course, he was also clutch in big games, especially in that 79 World Series.
I always forget that he doesn't have 500. He only has 475 home runs. And fun story, I was at Willie Stargell's retire game. His last game. I attended Willie Stargell's last game in Three River Stadium.
Was that the game where people threw batteries at Dave Parker?
No, that was like in the 80s. That was like 82
Well,
or
yeah, that
83.
would have been Stargell played until 82. So,
Yeah. No, there was nobody throwing anything at
okay, well,
Dave
that's
Parker.
good.
Everybody's just happy to see Willie Stargell play one last time. And I remember I had a hat. Remember the hat? And you used to have the Stargell stars on the
Oh,
like.
yeah.
And my
Yeah.
mom gave me a hat, and it had like this the little. She put a couple stars on there for me.
Nice.
And here's a question, Tim. Okay, so PNC Park. Let's say we can bring back Willie Stargell in his prime to PNC Park. Now you remember the home runs, right? That he hit in the upper deck of Three River Stadium. You remember the
Uh-huh.
numbers? Would one of those home runs have made it across the river?
Across the
I
river.
I
Huh.
think he hit. I think he hits Fort Duquesne Boulevard.
Wow, that's a great question.
I mean,
I thought you were going to say in the river, and I was going to say for sure, but across
but
the
no,
river. That's
across the
interesting.
river. Because think about that.
Yeah.
That was 600 level. He hit
Yeah.
it to the
Yeah.
600 level in what was that? Right, because he was a left-hander in right field.
Yeah.
One was in the seats too, like 10 rows up.
Yes.
Uh,
Well, they used to have a marker. Like there was a seat you could sit in up there that had
yeah,
a little
that was
mark on it.
painted. It was
Yeah.
painted. Yeah.
That-
So I
that-
would maybe somebody with a computer, if a computer person could take a simulation and we could simulate, Statcast those and see if how far they would have went in the river. I know they're making the river. It's just how far across the river are they getting?
That's a great question. That's a great what if.
Yeah.
Number 11 on the list is Rod Woodson, Steeler cornerback between 1987 and 1996. In the Pro Football Hall of Fame, on the 100th anniversary team, Defensive Player of the Year in '93, third all time in the NFL history in interceptions. Which I don't know that people would remember that he's third. He's in the top three all time.
More interceptions than a coach from Colorado.
That's true. So again, all the stats are there and all the accolades are there for Rod Woodson. But the reason that Steve and I probably have him so high is because I've never seen a defensive player single-handedly win games the way that Rod Woodson did. I think you could probably find guys that have. We talked about like Aaron Donald in that Super Bowl and people like that. But he did that consistently. There were games where literally the Steelers don't win if not for Rod Woodson, making some kind of turnover. There was a Monday Night Football game against Buffalo in '94. This was when Buffalo was the four-time defending AFC champion, and the Steelers scored 2 touchdowns in that game, and they're both Rod Woodson touchdowns. One was a pick six, and one was he made Jim Kelly fumble, and then somebody else fell on it. But like literally, that's the only 2 scores they had, and they beat the 4-time defending AFC champions because of a cornerback. So to me, that's his greatness. He's my all-time favorite Steeler. Steve, your thoughts?
He's the greatest defensive back in NFL history. There you go. Sorry, and I know everybody say Dion or Ronnie Lott or who else is up there, and who's the guy from Washington? Darrell Green.
Darrell Green, yeah.
And there's been a lot of other who else? There's been a lot of other good corners that have played.
Charles Woodson,
Darrell
Revis, yeah.
Revis could tackle, but that's the thing is Rod Woodson had the speed to play corner, but the physicality to play safety. And later in his career, he switched to safety. That's why he extended his career like another 5 years with the Raiders and Ravens. Played another Super Bowl with the Raiders, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
And so he was a very, and when he did that at the end, he was a very good safety. He was one of the best safeties in the league. I think he made all the Pro Bowl at safety.
Yes.
So Rod Woodson, like, to me, just like, he could tackle, he could cover, he could, hit. He's everything. Like, Dion never tackled anybody. And that's fine if you want, I'm a corner, that's not my job. But you know what? You're a football player and it is your job. You're on the field and sometimes you have to tackle people. And, it's just, it is what and they say this to Paul Krause too, the guy for the Vikings, he's the all-time leader, I still believe, in interceptions. And is that guy in the Hall of Fame yet? Or he wasn't.
Yeah, I think
he finally is. Like, yeah, because they always held, well, he doesn't have a lot of tackles. Well, he's a free safety. He shouldn't be tackling people, but I mean, it's tough to judge. He has more interceptions than a lot of other people that are more highly regarded. But in my mind, he's not. In my mind, for whatever opinion a guy from Beachview is worth, it's whatever.
So number 10 is Tony Dorsett, Pitt running back between 1973 and 1976. 4 times, all 4 of his years, he was a 1,000-yard rusher. All 4 of those years, he was an All-American. Pitt's only Heisman Trophy winner, led them to their only national championship of the modern era. And to this day, almost 50 years after he left Pitt, is still the 4th all-time leader in NCAA rushing yards.
So is it Ron Dane, Ricky Williams, and Priest Holmes? Is that
no? The guy that I think the guy's number 1 is like I won't remember his name, but he played for like San Diego State or like one of those kinds of schools that
okay.
The competition.
But Ron Dane and Ricky Williams are still like 2-3,
I think
right?
so.
Yeah.
I think so. But I mean, again, 50 years later, and he's still number 4. That's pretty impressive. Yeah. I mean, Pitt he just carried Pitt for 4 years.
And now this is the opposite of the quarterback. Like, Pitt has had a slew of great running backs.
Yeah.
And it's but he's still, head and shoulders probably a little ahead of Curtis Martin or some of the other famous people that have played at that university.
Oh yeah. I mean, we talked about Shady McCoy, Curtis Martin. Like you said, great running backs, guys we didn't even mention, James Conner, and but Tony
Dion
Dorsett,
Lewis,
Right.
So,
but Tony Dorsett just dominant, and again won a national championship, won the Heisman,
the only Heisman winner from Pitt. So, which is odd to think about, but
it is. So Tony Dorsett's our number 10. So we're into the top 10 now. Number 9, Troy Polamalu, played safety for the Steelers between 2003 and 2014. Won a Defensive Player of the Year award. Made 8 Pro Bowls. Is in the NFL's Hall of Fame. And another guy where, again, just take away the stats, he really revolutionized the safety position.
He did crazy stuff to like. There was that one against the Falcons. Matt Ryan threw like an out route to the sideline, and Troy Polamalu picked it off. Like, safeties really shouldn't be able to do that. Like, he undercut the wide receiver and tapped his toe. I mean, or the jumping over like on a QB sneak. Wouldn't it be fun to see Troy Polamalu with that the brotherly shove play they have now?
Yeah, that would.
He would totally like. He would jump over the top, but I guess Hurts would just carry him for a yard. I don't know. That would be interesting. That'd be fun to see. But he was great and very smart player too. Yeah. And another person that's a good person off the field. So
yes, another beloved Pittsburgh star.
Yeah, could run for mayor or whatever, city council. Yeah.
Yep. Number 8, a guy that probably would not. Well, maybe now, but at one time would not have won that race for mayor. It's Jaromir Jagr, played for the Penguins between 1990 and 2001. 9-time All-Star, 5-time scoring champion, league MVP. Jagr's an all-time great. He certainly, there was a period of time where we all didn't like him, and maybe deservedly so, but I think that's all changed. Time really healed those wounds. And the other thing to say about Jagr, obviously all the accolades that I mentioned, he has 4 playoff overtime goals.
Yeah.
Mario Lemieux and Sidney Crosby have combined for one playoff overtime goal in their careers, and Yager had four. So talk about a really clutch player. Jaromir Yager was absolutely a clutch player.
So is he the second or third greatest Penguin of all time? That's a good. I
Well,
mean,
according to how we rank them, he's
he's
third.
the third. Yeah,
Yeah, we have two other guys coming,
yeah.
and I bet you
So
can guess who they are, but we
yeah,
won't spoil it.
yeah. I mean, he's very good. He plays a different position than those other two people. So I don't know. Yager's a very good player, very good at like what he did, cycling down low, and he's still playing. I think he's still playing
Yes.
as of this year
Yeah.
in whatever Czech
At
league he
age
owns.
53 or whatever he's at. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
yeah.
Guy's just never
So
going to stop playing hockey.
yeah, it'd be like 67. Ah, I can still take these
Yeah.
guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's over back in home in the Czech Republic. So good for him. Maybe we'll
So
run for mayor over there.
there you go. So I'm going to talk about number 7 and number 6 together because we have Terry Bradshaw and Ben Roethlisberger as our next two on our list. And I think, we have them as Terry Bradshaw 7 and Ben 6.
Oh,
But
I don't know. Yeah.
I think
Bradshaw won more Super Bowls, Tim.
I think we almost call this a tie, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about Bradshaw first. Steeler quarterback between 1970 and 1983. Won 4 Super Bowls, was the MVP of 2 of those Super Bowls, was also the league MVP in 1978. Then you have Ben, played for the Steelers between 2004 and 2021, won 2 Super Bowls, including one with a last-second drive when they were trailing, holds every Steeler passing record, and is also in the top 5 in yards in NFL history.
Does he have the most fourth quarter comebacks of all time now? I think it's between him and Peyton, isn't it? Or
yeah, I thought it was him and Brady. We're both
yeah, that's right. It's him and Brady.
Yeah, Brady might have more, but yeah, Ben.
I think Ben has more than Tom Brady.
But both of these guys were really clutch, right? They were super clutch. I guess the one thing you could knock on Terry Bradshaw was it took him a couple of years to really get going. He wasn't very good early in his career, whereas Ben really kind of just shot out of the gate as a star.
But the Steelers weren't very good when Terry got there.
That's exactly right, and it was such a different era too.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Steve. I don't really want to debate who is better, Bradshaw or Ben. I think, like I said, this is almost like a tie at 7 and 6. They're the two greatest quarterbacks in Steeler history. Just like with Dan Marino, there's a huge drop off to third place. The Steelers don't win, and the Steelers are the Minnesota Vikings. If without these two guys, they're the team that was consistently good, and they've never won a Super Bowl. If not for these two guys, would you agree?
Yeah, that's yeah. It's just and it's a shame Minnesota. Yeah, I keep forgetting Minnesota's never, and they've been to what, four Super Bowls? Yeah, never won one. Go figure. They really haven't had a great quarterback though. That is the one. Like you think about Minnesota, they really Fran Tarkenton. I guess they had the Fran Tarkenton.
Yeah, there's a YouTube channel called Secret Base. They just did a 7 or 8 part documentary on the history of the Minnesota Vikings that I just watched this week. So it's kind of fresh in my mind. I don't want to stick there too long because it's a Pittsburgh podcast, but it's really interesting and fascinating, their history and all the reasons they never won one. But I think the Steelers, again, you at the end of the day, with very few exceptions, I know there was the Trent Dilfer year and all that kind of stuff, but with very few exceptions, you need a quarterback to win championships. And the Steelers had 2 great ones. And not only were they great, but they were great when they had to be in those big games.
Well, look at Belichick without Brady now. He's gone back to the Bill Belichick from Cleveland.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Bradshaw and Ben are 7 and 6. Number 5 is Sidney Crosby. Who played for the Penguins from 2005 to the present, has won 3 Stanley Cups, has won 2 Conn Smythes, has been league MVP twice. And again, throwing the accolades out the window for a minute, I think he's the greatest competitor I've ever seen. Like, I've never seen anybody want to win as badly as Sidney Crosby and work as hard at it.
Yeah, I think even after he retires, he's going to do something with hockey. I mean, and like, what a weird, like, has he ever had a scandal off? I've never heard, like, he's another one of these guys, like, I don't even hear like anything ever negative about him. Like, not that we ever hear anything about Larry Fitzgerald, but geez, he just like kind of like one of the few people that was hyped coming in, has lived up to the hype, and has, kept his nose clean off the field or off the ice or whatever you want to
And
call
I
it.
would
Yeah.
say he's done a really good job of not even like no scandals, but just privacy. Like you don't really know
I
much
think
about
he
him at
had a
all.
girlfriend or something. Like one day, like they announced he had a fiance at the arena, and I was like, "What? Huh? I didn't
Yeah.
even know." Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's what
he's
I
like a
mean.
major. I don't. Is he like that in Canada too? Because like Canada's. I guess he doesn't play in Canada, so maybe he's
Right.
able.
And
Like
he's
if
from
he
a
played in Toronto, I'm sure it'd be
it'd be
way
harder for
different.
him to maintain his
Yeah,
privacy for sure. But
yeah,
he's from Nova Scotia. He's not, so even when he goes back home, goes back to
yeah.
Cole Harbor. It's not like a big
You're
city
right.
necessarily. So yeah, he we had the experience a couple of years ago watching Ben retire, and I think when Sidney Crosby finally retires, Steve, I feel like that's going to be Ben times like 10. I really
Yeah.
do. Like I just it's going to be. Oof, we're gonna have to brace ourselves for that because it's gonna be a flood of emotions for all of us, I think.
Yeah, and he almost had to retire because of when he got hurt. And,
Yeah,
thank
came back
God,
from that.
thank God for Tom Brady. No.
That's right.
Yeah.
Like we talked about in a previous episode. All right, number 4 is Honus Wagner. Played for the Pirates between 1900 and 1917. Won 8 National League batting titles. Led the league in RBIs 5 times, stolen bases 5 times. Won a World Series. In the Hall of Fame. Arguably the greatest hitter, just pure hitter in Pirates history. Has a statue outside PNC Park. Just for somebody that played over 100 years ago to be in our top 5, it just says a lot to the kind of the enduring legacy of this guy, Steve.
Yeah, it was one part of the original members of the Baseball Hall of Fame. He was that original class.
Yeah,
Yeah. He's a good guy. Like it's a lot of these guys like were good people off the field too. I
yeah,
mean, couple or two there that for the Steelers, maybe not so much, but Honus Wagner, Sidney Crosby, Larry Fitzgerald, just off the field, like good people too. Like
yes,
that was a famous story. That's why his baseball card's so hard to find, is because he didn't like that. I guess what they did back then was like, remember, you used to get bubble gum and packs of baseball cards. Well, they put cigarettes with
right,
the baseball cards because I want a card of Honus Wagner. I'm going to buy this pack of Lucky Strikes or whatever. And so he didn't like that, so he would buy the packs of cigarettes and rip up his baseball cards, and that's why his are so valuable because there aren't very many left. So, very very good player too. Won a couple World Series with the Pirates, and if you go on YouTube, there is some YouTube video of him like doing batting practice with like he's well past his prime. I think
oh
he's
yeah,
like in the
yeah, we played
40s.
that in our lost
Yeah,
audio episode. Yeah, that was
yeah,
pretty fun to watch to
it's
listen
pretty
to.
cool. Yeah, he has like the old fashioned glove, like with the, the fingers that aren't sewn together. It's like, gosh,
um,
buried. I think he's buried in Pleasant Hills too. He lived in Carnegie, so yeah.
so number 3 on our list is Roberto Clemente, which should come as no surprise.
Yeah.
Played for the Pirates between 1955 and 1972. 15-time All-Star, 3,000 hits, 4-time batting champion, 12-time Gold Glove winner, 1966 National League MVP. Steve,
Greatest right fielder to ever play the game. I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah,
He used to throw people out at first
yeah, he did.
from right field at
Yeah,
first base.
right. Yeah,
Single-handedly won the 1971 World Series, him and Steve Blass.
yep,
So maybe not single-handed, but big.
pretty much. I
Yeah.
mean, and a guy that just transcended race and that
Yeah.
kind of stuff too. Just a hero, a legend. I like I said, we got to do. We said this when we talked about our tragedies. At some point, we really have to dedicate an entire episode to him. I think, to me, the thing about Clemente, you and I weren't born yet when he tragically died, but there are people that I talk to who were alive back then that still remember where they were, what they were doing when they heard the news, like JFK assassination.
Yeah.
It impacted Pittsburghers that deeply. So he has to be high on this list, and we have him at number 3. Number 2 is Joe Green, Steelers defensive tackle from 1969 to 1981. also on that 100th anniversary team. The only Steeler to ever win the Defensive Player of the Year award twice. And Dan Rooney has said he's the greatest Steeler of all time. So once again, Dan Rooney was pretty qualified to make that assessment. And I think, again, just taking away the stats and everything, the greatest dynasty in NFL history was literally built around Joe Green.
That's where it all started. Yeah, first pick. But
And
did they have to flip a coin to get him too, or
that was Bradshaw?
Oh, that was Bradshaw. Okay,
Yeah.
but yeah, they had he was one of Chuck Noll's first picks, and
Yep,
made it a good one, and he changed the the trajectory of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like you said, they had basically been the the Los Angeles Clippers or Cincinnati Bengals of of sports franchises, and now they became more like the Yankees or Giants. So they
Yep.
wouldn't be the Steelers without Dan Rooney and Mean Joe Green. That was definitely where it all started.
Yeah, I don't think you can say enough about what Joe Green meant to the franchise, like you just kind of pointed out. That's really his value. He's obviously a great player, all-time great player, but his value to the franchise is what puts him this high on our list.
And they didn't know losing. He didn't know losing, and the guys that came in after him didn't know losing, and that changed the culture. It's like kind of a study in like how to change the culture and a business that maybe needs a culture change.
That's a good point too. And the culture, again, 50 years later, is still the same culture. Yeah. And there's a story about the 1974 season, the year they won that first Super Bowl. He was ready to quit. He literally was like, I'm just done because this team is not winning. They're not playing as well as they should. And he just willed them to be the greatest team of all time. And they built it around him. He was like you said, he was the OG. So, well, that finally brings us to our number one greatest player in the history of Pittsburgh sports.
Drum roll, please.
And that is Mario Lemieux. Played for the Penguins between 1984 and 1997, then came back and played for the Penguins between 2001 and 2006. Just some stats here: 3-time MVP, 6-time scoring champion, 2 times Conn Smythe winner, 5-time Stanley Cup winner if you count his years as owners. Has there ever been a guy that was more exciting and more dominant that you've ever watched in your life in any sport for any team?
No, I would have to say it has to be the feeling that maybe like people that are LeBron James fans or Michael Jordan or
Jordan's a good comparison.
Yeah, like you just knew when you had that guy and he was playing for your team that anything was possible. You were never out of any game, and that you just never knew when he was just gonna say, I want to win tonight and gonna take over.
Yes.
And there are a lot of, once again, the guy seems at least pretty good off the ice. Does a lot of stuff around the community, and just with all his struggles with cancer and such, and playing after chemo, and what an inspiration. And then a great owner, ends up being a great owner until I guess he's not, doesn't own the team anymore, but saved the Penguins twice, saved them in the 80s and then saved them in the 2000s from bankruptcy. So good for him. Got him a new arena. I mean, definitely probably one of the most influential. He's only above Mean Joe Green because he owned the team. To me, I know we weren't supposed to include that, but he literally, the Penguins would not exist. The Steelers would still exist if it wasn't for Mean Joe Green.
Right.
The Penguins would be in Kansas City or Saskatchewan somewhere.
Yeah.
If Mario Lemieux did not come around.
And twice. Like 2 different times that would have happened.
And what a privilege, like between Crosby and Lemieux and Malkin. I mean, that the Penguins have been really fortunate, and we've been fortunate as fans to live through it. Like, maybe 100 years from now, somebody will be doing a podcast and think, oh, what are those, people are so lucky to live through that.
Well, yeah, it's kind of the equivalent of like being a Yankees fan through Ruth and Gehrig and DiMaggio and Mantle, right? It's very similar to that. And you're right, the team wouldn't exist without him. What other player on any team in any sport?
It's hard to press. Like the Cleveland Cavaliers would still be in Cleveland, I think. The Lakers definitely aren't going anywhere.
Yeah,
Maybe Wilt Chamberlain, or not Wilt Chamberlain, the other one, Abdul Jabbar. But even then, didn't he play for Milwaukee? Or
right. Yeah.
and they
I, I, I-
moved.
yeah, I just don't think that there's one. Yeah, there. I
I
don't
can't think of another player that's
know.
single handedly like I don't know. I try to some of the Packers.
I
I
think
don't
George
know.
Hallis played for the Bears when he first owned
Yeah,
them. Like you'd have to go back to something like that, or like
Like a
early,
Bronco Nagurski, like, but
right.
even yeah,
You'd have to go back to something like that. So in the modern era, there's nothing like Mario Lemieux. And then when you so that's one thing. And then when you add on the fact that he was again, like you said, the Michael Jordan-esque dominance, highlight reels, just could take over games, wasn't even fair to the competition kind of a player. When you add that in, he's just to me, you and I, again, we both did our list independently and we both had Mario at number one.
yeah,
So
yeah, and I think he's better than Gretzky. I mean, but that's just me. I'm biased. But I guess Gretzky has the better numbers. Unfortunately, Lemieux had some injuries. Maybe
right,
would have caught Gretzky, at least
right.
in overall points and definitely in goals. I think Lemieux was a different type of player.
He was.
Lemieux was more of a breakaway, but he could pass too. But whereas I always saw Gretzky more as a facilitator. Both work, both are great players. It's kind of like comparing like different styles of basketball point guards. Do you want like the Magic Johnson kind of pass the ball guy, or do you want the Michael Jordan, I'm going to dribble down and beat you off the dribble kind of guy? Both are very good players, and you're going to win championships with both those people. It's just a matter of style, I guess.
It's super hard to compare the two of them too. I know everybody always has, but the Gretzky had Edmonton put a great team around him right away. The Penguins didn't do that until Lemieux's career was almost literally half over. And then there was a different era too. I mean, the second half of Mario's career was played in that clutch and grab
Yeah.
era of hockey. The '80s were wide open. The goalie pads were like nothing. It just was a different era. So I think it's hard to compare the two of them. I know, like I said, everybody does because they were contemporaries. And people did it back then, right? There was a Sports Illustrated cover in the '80s that had Mario on the cover and said, is he as great as Gretzky? So that was always the comparison. Mario wore Gretzky's number upside down,
Yeah.
and all that stuff. People argue that to the end of the time. I stopped caring about that because, I, again, the Penguins,
Both are great players.
yeah, both
So
are great players, and
yeah.
Mario, like no one, Gretzky can't say that he single-handedly saved a franchise twice. Gretzky hasn't, and again, this is not a knock on Gretzky, but Gretzky hasn't. Mario Lemieux's contribution to the city, a guy that wasn't from this city, a guy wasn't even from this country. It's Andrew Carnegie esque in terms of
Well,
the
I guess
contribution.
people would argue, well, Wayne Gretzky expanded the reach of hockey, or
Yeah, you could certainly make that argument too.
yeah, because he
Again,
went to LA and
yes,
yeah,
I'm not gonna. I'm not here to bash Wayne Gretzky. It's just Mario Lemieux to this town specifically.
yeah,
There's nothing like it in terms of comparison.
absolutely. I can't disagree with you on that.
So there you go.
Yeah, that's it. That's the list, folks. All 100. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you disagree with them, they were all Tim's choices.
Thanks again, folks, so much for listening. Thanks for sticking with us through 100 episodes. Please check us out on Twitter or Facebook. Please subscribe to the show, and we'll catch you next time.